Welcome to part 2 of Mafia Queen's quest for the chef's heart. Let's see if Lucia win Tori over, or will Tori step back into what is safe, walls and hiding. Chapter 23. Walls Have Fallen. The sun had sunk low, casting long, golden shadows across the vineyard rows. A gentle breeze carried the scent of ripening grapes, dust, and wildflowers. Tori lingered at the edge of the pergola, holding her glass of Nebbiolo, eyes scanning the horizon, but not really seeing it. Lucia approached, carrying a small plate of aged cheeses. She moved carefully, deliberately, and when she stepped beside Tori, their shoulders brushed lightly. Just a touch, a fleeting warmth that lingered only for a heartbeat. Tori's fingers tightened subtly around the stem of her glass, but she did not pull away. Lucia's gaze met hers, soft but knowing, as if reading the faint tremor she hadn't admitted to. She adjusted the plate, leaning ever so slightly closer, letting her hand hover near Tori's just an inch too long, enough for the air between them to hum. Tori's pulse flickered. She shifted, ever so slightly, unconsciously leaning toward the warmth, yet keeping her posture precise. Her jaw flexed. Her breath hitched, not audible, but perceptible if one knew where to look. Lucia smiled faintly, patient, teasing, and placed the smallest slice of cheese onto Tori's plate. Her fingers brushed the edge of Tori's hand for just an instant, accidental only in appearance. Tori's chest tightened. That fraction of a second spoke louder than 100 words could. "You move differently when you're not in the kitchen," Lucia said softly, voice low, melodic, almost a whisper carried by the breeze. "You taste slower. You breathe differently." Tori didn't answer. She let her hand rest near Lucia's on the table, tension mingling with curiosity. The micro-concession, the softening, the slight allowance, hung between them like the golden light of sunset. Lucia didn't push further. She simply leaned back, letting the space remain intimate, teasing, alive. Her eyes flicked to Tori's, holding the gaze just long enough to promise patience, to promise intent, to promise that this dance was far from over. Tori exhaled slowly, the smallest, quietest sigh escaping her lips. She allowed herself to notice the warmth, to feel it, to recognize it, without giving herself entirely. And for the first time that afternoon, she realized she could enjoy this, even if just for a moment. The vineyard held them in a suspended bubble of sun, shadow, and subtle electricity. No words. No overt gestures. Only touch, breath, and intention, speaking the slowest, most intoxicating language they had yet shared. Chapter 24. Protective Heart. The breeze whispered through the grapevines, carrying the faint scent of earth and ripened fruit. Tori sat just slightly forward, glass of wine resting loosely in her hand, eyes distant, tracing the neat lines of the vineyard rows. Lucia remained beside her, patient, steady, her presence a soft gravity that invited, never forced. She let a quiet moment linger, letting Tori settle into the space, letting her walls rest without having to fight to hold them up. Then, softly, almost a whisper carried by the wind, Lucia asked, "Who hurt you so deep that you had to build a fortress around yourself?" Tori's fingers tightened around her glass. The words were not loud, not accusatory, just deliberate, gentle, probing. They landed where no one else had dared, inside the carefully constructed walls, in the spaces she thought invisible, untouchable. Tori's breath caught, just a fraction. She lowered her gaze to the vineyard floor, to the small, perfect cracks in the gravel. No one had asked her that before. No one had dared. Not a single person, not her nana, not the world that demanded perfection from her, not even the few she had ever trusted. Lucia's hand hovered near Tori's, not pressing, not reaching fully, but just close enough to offer presence, patience, and permission. Tori's voice was low, almost strangled by the weight of years, a tremor she rarely allowed anyone to witness. "When I was 12, my parents, disappeared on a cruise. No warning. No chance to say goodbye. The world expected me to become someone else, someone strong. She swallowed hard, letting the words rest between them, fragile and jagged. And I had to build walls, brick by brick, to survive. To keep anything, or anyone, from being able to hurt me that way again. Lucia's eyes softened, understanding, patient, her hand brushing closer, still without touching, still without forcing, letting Tori see that someone could witness the pain and still respect the walls. "You are incredible," Lucia said quietly, letting the words hover in the air like a gentle caress, and still, here, in this light, letting me share it with you, even a little, that takes more courage than anyone knows. Tori's lips twitched faintly, the smallest acknowledgement, a micro-concession of presence, a quiet surrender to trust. No words could fully capture it. No gestures could fully define it. But in that moment, between sun, soil, and patient gaze, her fortress had a single window open. And for once, she did not immediately shut it. Chapter 25. Let me in. The sun had dipped lower, turning the sky a molten amber, softening the edges of everything. Tori sat still, her hands cradling the wine glass like a shield, eyes tracing distant rows of grapevines yet never fully leaving Lucia's presence. Lucia leaned just slightly forward, her shoulder brushing against Tori's ever so subtly, not enough to startle, not enough to demand, just enough to share warmth, without words. She let her gaze soften, patient, letting her eyes convey what lips could not yet. "I see you. I am here. I will wait." She reached for a small slice of bread on the plate, cutting it with deliberate calm, and held it out toward Tori. Not pressing, not forcing, just offering. Tori's hand twitched, hovering, then slowly took the piece, their fingers brushing slightly. It was fleeting, almost accidental, but deliberate enough for both to feel the tiny bridge being built. Lucia's voice was barely a whisper, carried on the breeze. "You don't have to carry it alone. Not all of it. Not with me." Tori's chest tightened. She swallowed, a quiet tremor running through her. No walls fell, no fortress crumbled, but a crack widened just enough to let warmth seep in. She met Lucia's eyes fully for the first time since the vineyard, allowing herself to see patience mirrored back, to feel the unspoken promise that her past pain was witnessed, not judged. Lucia's hand rested lightly on the edge of the table, so near to Tori's that the heat from her skin brushed against Tori's without pressing, without claiming. A silent invitation. "Trust the space I am holding for you." Tori exhaled slowly, almost imperceptibly. She let her shoulders relax fractionally, leaned a fraction closer, just enough that the distance between them shrank, not a collapse, not a surrender, but a deliberate acknowledgement that connection could exist without chaos, without fear. Lucia smiled softly, warm but restrained, letting the moment breathe. "We'll take our time," she murmured. "I'm not rushing. I'm here for as long as it takes." The wine glinted gold in the last rays of sun, the vineyard holding them in a quiet cocoon of light, warmth, and subtle electricity. No words were necessary beyond that. Presence, patient gestures, the tiniest touches, and shared breath had woven the first delicate thread of emotional intimacy. Tori realized, with a shiver she didn't name, that she could feel it and not pull away. For the first time in a long time, letting someone in did not mean losing control. It meant choice. Chapter 26. Small Surrenders. The vineyard air had grown cooler as the sun slipped behind the hills, leaving a soft, amber glow. Shadows stretched between the rows of grapevines, wrapping around Tori and Lucia like a private world, suspended just for them. Tori sat, shoulders slightly eased, hands resting lightly around her wineglass, yet still careful, still precise. Her eyes followed Lucia, who moved with her usual grace, yet there was a softness now, a measured intent that made the air between them thrum. Lucia reached across the small space of the table, not pressing, not demanding, just hovering, her fingertips brushing the back of Tori's hand lightly. The contact was fleeting, almost accidental, yet deliberate enough to speak volumes. A micro-gesture. A whisper of presence. Tori's breath hitched, a quiet tremor she could not hide. Her fingers twitched, almost meeting Lucia's, then hesitated, suspended in a decision she hadn't made before. Retreat or allow the warmth, the patience, the unspoken invitation. Lucia's eyes softened, patient, teasing, and she leaned in just slightly, her other hand resting near Tori's plate. Her proximity was careful, enough to feel the warmth of her presence, enough to let Tori know she was not alone, but not enough to overwhelm. "You don't have to hold everything in," Lucia whispered, her voice low, carried on the soft evening breeze. "Not with me." Tori exhaled slowly, a micro-moment of surrender that was not weakness, just acknowledgement. She let her hand drift closer, fingertips brushing against Lucia's this time, just barely, electric and deliberate. The touch was brief, but it spoke. "I see you. I feel you. And I choose to let this be." Lucia's faint smile mirrored the unspoken promise. She did not push further. She simply held the space, presence patient, warm, attentive. Tori, for the first time in decades, allowed herself to lean slightly toward trust, toward connection, toward the delicate intimacy that had been hovering in the air between them. The sun vanished behind the hills, leaving a soft twilight glow. Shadows wrapped around them, yet for the first time, the darkness did not feel isolating. It felt shared, safe, alive. Their hands remained just inches apart, warmth humming quietly in the space between fingertips. In that tender, suspended moment, Tori realized something profound. Letting someone in, even fractionally, did not destroy her control. It deepened it. And in that realization, the slow burn became something richer, more dangerous, more intoxicating than she had ever allowed herself to imagine. Chapter 27. Hands that hold. The last traces of sunlight had vanished, leaving the vineyard bathed in soft silver and shadow. The air was cooler now, carrying the scent of earth, grapes, and the faint sweetness of the day's warmth fading into night. Tori and Lucia walked slowly along the narrow paths between the vines, careful not to disturb the stillness, their steps measured, deliberate. Tori's heels occasionally struck small stones, her balance precise, but taut, muscles alert. At one point, she stumbled slightly on a hidden rock. Lucia's hand was immediately there, a warm, steady anchor. Her fingers laced with Tori's, gentle but confident, strong enough to steady without forcing. Tori froze, a quiet jolt running through her. She had not expected the contact, not yet, not like this. Her chest fluttered subtly, pulse quickening. Lucia's touch was patient, grounding, the microelectricity humming in that brief interlace of fingers. She didn't speak. She didn't comment. She simply held the space, letting the shared warmth linger, letting Tori feel the trust without demanding any reciprocation beyond the subtle squeeze that steadied her. Tori's jaw flexed, shoulders easing fractionally as she absorbed the contact. She allowed herself the tiniest exhale, acknowledging the deliberate intimacy of the moment. Her eyes flicked to Lucia's, and in that glance, unspoken understanding passed between them. This was care, patience, and intent all at once. Lucia's eyes softened, a faint smile teasing at the edges, patient but daring. She walked a step closer, letting the interlaced fingers linger, just slightly, enough to keep the current alive without pushing Tori off balance. Tori's other hand flexed unconsciously at her side. She had not leaned fully into the gesture, nor had she pulled away. But the tiniest micro-concession, a half-step toward trust, toward warmth, was enough for Lucia to sense that her patience was rewarded. They continued walking, fingers still laced, silent, letting the vineyard absorb their presence, the night sky witnessing a subtle escalation in their slow burn dance. Every step, every touch, every glance spoke volumes. This was intimacy without rush, trust without surrender, connection without words. By the time they reached the edge of the vineyard, Tori's chest was lighter than it had been in years, and yet the fortress remained carefully maintained, now with a single, deliberate window open. Lucia didn't release her hand, not yet. And Tori, for the first time, didn't move hers away. Chapter 28. Holding Space. The vineyard's shadows stretched long across the gravel as Tori and Lucia reached the small car parked near the edge of the estate. The night air was cool, carrying the faint sweetness of crushed grape leaves and the crisp hint of evening breeze. Tori paused, hand still loosely intertwined with Lucia's. She hadn't moved to pull away, and the pause, just standing there, shoulder to shoulder, felt suspended in time. Lucia leaned in subtly, not too close, and brought her other hand to gently cradle Tori's fingers. Her lips brushed the knuckles in a soft, deliberate kiss. No words. No rush. Just presence. Just acknowledgement. Just holding space for what had passed, for what was happening, and for the unspoken promise of what was to come. Tori's chest lifted in a quiet inhale, pulse thrumming beneath the subtle touch. Her gaze met Lucia's, eyes wide, registering the careful intimacy. She said nothing, and neither did Lucia. Words weren't necessary. The warmth, the patience, the care in that single gesture said everything. Lucia slowly withdrew her hand, but let her fingers linger near Tori's, hovering like a whispered promise. She smiled softly, patient, teasing without demand, letting Tori feel the continuity of intention, the slow, steady rhythm of trust being offered and received. Tori exhaled, just slightly, a micro-concession of presence and acceptance. She knew, in that quiet, golden black night, that the fortress had not fallen, but a window had been opened, delicately, deliberately, and for the first time, she did not immediately close it. Lucia stepped back, letting Tori move toward her car at her own pace. The night held them both in a gentle cocoon of possibility, trust, and slow-burning intimacy, leaving them suspended on the edge of something far deeper, far more dangerous, far more delicious than either had yet named. Tori closed the door to her apartment and leaned against it for a heartbeat, letting the lock click with a quiet finality. The house was silent, the faint hum of the city beyond her windows muted against the walls she had built so carefully over the years. Her chest was heavy, thunderous, heart still hammering in her ribcage like a drum she couldn't silence. She traced a finger along the curve of her knuckles, memory of the kiss lingering, warmth blooming beneath her skin. How could something so fleeting feel so permanent? She sank onto the edge of the couch, letting the weight of the evening settle, her mind replaying every micro-gesture, the brush of fingers in the vineyard, the patient warmth of Lucia's hand, the deliberate restraint in every glance and pause. Her mind, trained for precision, for control, for seeing 10 steps ahead in a kitchen full of chaos, now struggled with something it could not measure or anticipate: desire, intention, patience, trust. Her fingers twitched again, almost unconsciously reaching toward the memory of the warmth she had felt. Her lips parted slightly, a soft exhale that carried more than relief. It carried recognition. She realized, slowly, painfully, deliciously, she wanted more. More of that patient tease, more of the deliberate, slow connection that challenged every rule she had set for herself. More of the way Lucia could nudge her walls without shattering them, the way she made patience feel like a gift rather than a test. Tori's gaze drifted to the kitchen, to the precision she demanded of herself, the order she lived by. And yet, for the first time in years, she wondered, not about the next service, not about the flawless execution of dishes, but about the next shared glance, the next careful touch, the next moment where she could allow herself to feel without fear. Her fingers brushed her knuckles again, tingling, alive. Her chest tightened with the knowledge that she wanted more than a single night, more than a single taste of this slow-burning connection. And the thought made her pulse quicken, made her chest ache, made her walls quiver in ways she had not allowed herself to feel in a decade. Tori leaned back, eyes closing, heart thundering in the quiet apartment. Desire, patience, and the echo of a gentle, teasing touch had taken root. And, for the first time, she did not recoil from it. Chapter 29. Language in Dessert. The restaurant buzzed with its usual rhythm, the clatter of plates, the hiss of the stove, the precise choreography of staff moving like cogs in a perfect machine. Tori moved through it all as she always did, controlled, precise, every step measured, but beneath the familiar cadence, her chest carried a quiet, simmering heartbeat that was entirely her own. Table 9 waited, as it always did, though tonight it felt different. Tori's eyes found it across the dining room, lingering just long enough to catch a glimpse of Lucia Romano, poised, elegant, patient, reading the room as if it were a language only she could interpret. Tori walked with intention to the dessert station. Her hands worked with flawless precision, plating something small yet deliberate, a delicate millefeuille, layered with silken cream, a whisper of gold dust, a single edible violet resting atop. But there was something more, a tiny, handwritten note tucked beneath the violet. "I see you too, and I want to take the risk." The note was careful, deliberate, measured, a micro-concession of vulnerability, a choice Tori had not allowed herself to make in years. She placed the dessert on the tray with meticulous care, each movement deliberate, each breath controlled, then sent it out to the table with a slight, almost imperceptible nod toward Lucia. Lucia's eyes followed the tray, then flicked up at Tori, a soft, teasing spark lighting her gaze. Her fingers flexed slightly at the edge of the table, brushing the linen as if to acknowledge the gesture without speaking, reading the language Tori had created without words. Tori watched discreetly from the kitchen pass-through, her chest tightening in anticipation, heart thrumming, not from chaos or precision, but from choice. The slow, deliberate risk of emotional exposure coursed through her, and she realized this was a step she had been unwilling to take until now. A step toward trust, toward connection, toward the delicious uncertainty that only Lucia Romano could provoke. Lucia broke the note seal with the faintest smile, eyes lifting to Tori's from across the room, sending a signal that did not require words. A response, subtle but electric, the spark of a slow-burning dance acknowledged and reciprocated. Tori exhaled softly, the tiniest fraction of a sigh escaping her chest. She returned to her kitchen rhythm, but the energy had shifted. The fortress had not fallen, but a deliberate, meaningful door had opened, and for the first time in years, Tori Thorne allowed herself to see what lay beyond it. Chapter 30. I Feel It. The restaurant hummed around them, but in the space between kitchen and table 9, a quiet current flowed, invisible to everyone else. Tori moved with the same measured precision, plating dishes, checking sauces, tasting, instructing, but something in her rhythm had shifted. It was slower, lighter, deliberate, as if her movements carried an undercurrent she didn't yet dare to name aloud. Lucia sat at her table, poised, eyes scanning the menu almost absent-mindedly, yet always flicking to the kitchen at just the right moment. She had the note in hand, the dessert before her, but her attention was elsewhere, on Tori, on the subtle shifts in her posture, the micro-concessions she had just offered. Their eyes met across the distance, not long, not staring, just a flicker, a brief alignment that spoke louder than words. Tori's shoulders flexed slightly, a small, almost imperceptible exhale escaping her lips. A signal, a micro-movement that said, "I am aware. I feel it. And I want this too." Lucia's gaze softened, the faintest curve of a smile at the corners of her lips. She picked up her fork and touched the dessert lightly, then paused, leaving it untouched for just a heartbeat longer than necessary. Her eyes lifted again to Tori, a silent acknowledgement. I understand. I see a restraint. And I'm willing to match it. Neither moved toward the other, neither spoke. The distance remained, but it was no longer empty. The air between them thrummed with mutual recognition of desire, careful yet undeniable, each micro-gesture deliberate, intentional, patient. Tori checked a sauce, moved toward a plate, but allowed her hand to linger on the edge of the counter for just an extra beat, almost unconsciously aligning with the line of sight to table 9. Her fingers twitched slightly, a silent echo of connection. Lucia's hand, resting near her dessert plate, flexed subtly, fingers brushing the linen in a way that mirrored Tori's hesitation, mirrored her control, mirrored her intent. A conversation without words, without motion, yet every bit as intimate as a confession. In that suspended moment, they both realized the same thing. They wanted this, both of them. Desire, connection, patience, trust. And yet, they would take it slow, intentional, savoring every microstep, letting the fortress remain half-standing even as the windows widened. The restaurant buzzed, the world moved, yet time had its own rhythm for them, one of silent acknowledgement, careful intention, and electricity in restraint. Chapter 31. The chef softened. The restaurant hummed on, fading toward the quiet lull before closing. Tori moved from station to station, tasting, adjusting, instructing, but something in her rhythm had changed. Her hands, precise as always, lingered fractionally longer on the edge of the counter, near where the line of sight to table 9 ran. Lucia noticed. Of course she noticed. She did not move, did not comment. She simply lifted her gaze, soft, patient, teasing, and let it linger just enough to let Tori feel the pull between them without forcing her hand. Tori paused mid-motion, fingers resting lightly on the smooth counter, almost unconsciously tilting her hand so that if Lucia reached, though she didn't yet, she would find a pathway. A subtle invitation, a micro-concession. Lucia's breath caught ever so slightly, her lips curving into a faint, knowing smile. She mirrored the patience, leaving her own hand relaxed on the table, inches from Tori's implied reach, acknowledging the gesture without overstepping. Tori allowed herself a fraction of a step closer, leaning just slightly forward under the pretense of checking a plate, her fingers brushing the counter near the space where a hand could meet hers. It was electric, yet restrained, deliberate, a careful dance of proximity and intent. The moment hung, suspended, a conversation through presence, patience, and touch. No words were needed. No confession was spoken. Tori's fortress remained, but a small window was open, a subtle acknowledgement of trust, desire, and willingness to risk the walls she had built so carefully. Lucia's eyes caught Tori's, and in the unspoken glance, a promise passed between them. I see your restraint, and I respect it, but I also see the part of you that wants this as much as I do. Tori exhaled softly, a tremor she did not hide, letting the electricity hum in the gap between them. She had given a piece of herself, tiny, precise, fleeting, but enough to signal she was willing to explore what they could become. And the slow burn, it only grew stronger, simmering beneath the polished floors, the clinking silverware, and the quiet hum of Maison Lumière. Chapter 32. Flirting with Danger. The restaurant had quieted, only a few lingering staff tidying tables and polishing glassware. Table 9 remained, illuminated by the soft glow of a single candle, its flame flickering like the tension simmering between them. Tori moved with her usual precision, yet there was a subtle tremor in her steps she could not hide, an imperceptible shift in rhythm that spoke louder than words. Every glance she cast toward Lucia carried weight now, measured but loaded, her chest rising a fraction faster than usual. Lucia's gaze had changed too. It was no longer merely attentive or playful. It was deliberate, probing, scented with intent and need. Each look was carefully calibrated, reading Tori's micro-reactions, measuring the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers twitched near the edge of the counter. She didn't rush. She didn't reach out. Yet her eyes were saying, "I want you. I am here. And I will wait for every inch you allow." Tori felt it like fire lacing through her veins. The memory of that soft, deliberate kiss on her knuckles from the vineyard night flared to life, and for the first time, she dared to wonder, how would the rest taste? The thought was dangerous, exciting, unsettling. She couldn't let herself dwell too long, yet she couldn't turn away. Lucia leaned just slightly forward, fingers brushing the edge of the table. Not too close, not intrusive, but enough for the air between them to crackle. The movement was minimal, yet intimate, a calculated closeness that drew Tori's gaze, pulled her pulse into fast forward, and teased at the walls she had maintained for so long. Tori's hand hovered near the counter, poised as if to touch, yet she waited, a conscious surrender to anticipation. The space between them was magnetic, pulling them together without a single overt motion. Every micro-gesture, breath, gaze, shift in posture spoke volumes. Lucia's eyes, dark and deliberate, held Tori's in a slow, exquisite challenge. She was patient, yet unyielding, a promise and a dare, wrapped in silk and shadow. Tori's chest tightened, realizing she was no longer merely curious. She craved the deliberate closeness, the teasing restraint, the promise of that first, forbidden kiss. The candlelight danced across their features, highlighting the dangerous intimacy of the moment. Each second stretched, heavy with unspoken desire, as if the entire world had contracted to the space between them. Tori exhaled, slowly, deliberately, letting herself linger in the tension. She wanted to reach, to taste, to feel, but she also knew the power of restraint, of anticipation, of savoring the slow burn. And she did. More than she had allowed herself to admit in a decade. Lucia's lips curved, faintly, knowingly, as if she could feel the storm inside Tori and was patiently stoking it, letting the desire thread through without unraveling the careful dance they had built. The pull between them was magnetic, intoxicating, and absolutely, deliciously dangerous. Chapter 33. Breach the Fortress. The restaurant was quiet now, the soft clatter of a dish here and there fading into the stillness of closing time. Candlelight flickered on the polished tables, long shadows stretching across the empty floor. Lucia sat at table 9, calm in appearance, but her chest pulsed with anticipation, heart hammering a rhythm that matched the restrained electricity she could feel emanating from the kitchen. She could hear it, the quiet cadence of Tori's steps, precise and deliberate, echoing softly against the tiles. Her eyes traced the path, catching Tori's glances from the pass-through, fleeting and cautious, measuring, assessing, resisting. Every stolen look, every subtle tilt of the head, every breath drawn just so, it all spoke a language Lucia had learned to read, a fortress tested, walls trembling but intact, a storm restrained. And then, decision, enough waiting, enough patience, enough dancing around restraint. Lucia rose, deliberate, letting each step carry her closer with measured intention, letting the click of her heels mark a heartbeat in the stillness. Her pulse raced, slow and fast at once, as the distance between her and Tori shrank with purpose. The kitchen doors loomed ahead, polished steel reflecting the soft candlelight from the dining room. With a small inhale, she pushed them open. Tori was there, in the center of the kitchen, hands gripping the edge of the white marble counter as if it were the only anchor keeping her poised. Her back was straight, shoulders tense, jaw set, but her eyes caught Lucia immediately. The storm in them was palpable, a current of want and need restrained for a decade. Lucia stepped forward, slow, deliberate. The air between them thickened, every inch charged, every heartbeat amplified. She did not speak. She did not rush. She simply let herself enter the space Tori had never allowed anyone in, letting presence and intent carry the weight of words unspoken. Tori's chest rose and fell, breaths uneven now, subtle tremor in her fingers betraying the discipline she had tried to maintain. Her eyes locked on Lucia's, and for the first time, she did not step back. She did not resist. Not fully. Lucia's gaze softened, teasing, patient, and yet there was no mistaking it. This was deliberate, this was bold, this was the next step in a slow-burning dance that had been building for nights. The kitchen, once her kingdom of order and control, now felt electric and precarious. The clatter of pans and hiss of stoves were gone, leaving just the hum of their presence, the pulse of desire threading through the space. Lucia's hand hovered, almost imperceptibly, as if tracing the air near Tori, letting intention and patience speak louder than a single word. Tori's pulse spiked at the near touch, the stolen heat between them igniting something she could no longer deny. The slow burn had reached a moment of delicious, dangerous suspense, two forces, deliberate and controlled, standing mere inches apart, ready to test the walls they had so carefully maintained, one micro-gesture at a time. Chapter 34. The Challenge. Lucia's hands hovered in the narrow space between them, trembling just slightly, betraying the careful control she had maintained for nights. The heat radiating from Tori was undeniable. Every breath she took hit the air between them, heavy, measured, but ragged with the strain of restraint. Her lips parted, a soft, trembling whisper breaking the silence. "Can we stop running from this?" The words hung there, fragile yet bold, carrying all the tension, the desire, the patience, the unspoken promise that had threaded through their nights. Tori's breath caught sharply. Her fingers, still resting on the marble counter, flexed unconsciously. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, pulse hammering against the walls she had built so carefully over the years. That whisper, Lucia's deliberate, trembling need, struck deeper than anything spoken before, pulling at the pieces of herself she had long kept hidden. Tori's eyes met hers, dark, wide, electric. No words came, none were needed. The fortress she had maintained, brick by brick, shuddered at the weight of that single sentence. Desire, curiosity, and the thrill of danger coiled together in a taut line between them. The air seemed to crackle. Every inch of space between them was alive, the heat, the scent, the almost touch of hands. Tori realized in that heartbeat that she wanted this, wanted her, wanted the risk, and yet the discipline honed over a decade wrestled with the pull. Lucia's lips curved ever so slightly, a mixture of patience and daring, letting the whispered plea hang like a challenge and a promise all at once. She did not move closer, yet the tension of her hovering hands, her steady gaze, and that single question spoke louder than any kiss could. Tori inhaled, slow, deliberate, letting the pulse of the moment wash through her. Her hands twitched half a step, a micro-gesture toward reach, yet restraint still ruled, for now. And yet, in her chest, she knew, the fortress was no longer impenetrable. That single, shaky whisper had shifted the entire landscape of desire between them. For the first time in years, Tori didn't immediately retreat. She didn't shut the door. She simply stood there, captured by the gravity of what had been offered, and what she now craved. Chapter 35. Surrender. Time seemed to fracture the moment Lucia's whispered plea hung in the air. Gravity took over, pulling them together as if the universe itself had conspired to erase the distance they had maintained for so long. Tori's hands, previously poised on the marble, caught Lucia's waist instinctively, but with the force of need, of want, of everything they had denied themselves. Lucia pressed in without hesitation, her fingers tangling into the nape of Tori's neck, anchoring her, drawing her in closer, as if to merge months of longing into a single, searing moment. The kiss was not soft. Not delicate. Not polite. It was a collision. Lips met lips with an intensity that stole breath and thought alike. The fire that had simmered in glances, in gestures, in stolen proximity, ignited fully raw and unrestrained. Tori's mouth opened, tasting, claiming, exploring, the restraint of years unraveling in the heat of shared need. Lucia responded in kind, fierce yet patient, letting Tori set the rhythm, matching the desire that had been built over nights of quiet observation, subtle provocations, and carefully measured gestures. They pressed together, bodies aligning, pulses racing, the air between them vibrating with months of held-back hunger. Hands roamed just enough to claim, to anchor, to own the space between them without tearing it apart, every motion deliberate, electric. Tori's knees threatened to buckle, but she steadied herself against the counter, grounding in the only way she could through the searing, consuming contact of this kiss. The collision of lips spoke of every stolen glance, every patient gesture, every whispered tease across nights of measured proximity. It was a culmination of restraint, trust, curiosity, and fire, all crashing into one perfect, dangerous, exquisite storm. They pulled back just slightly, foreheads resting together, breaths ragged, hearts hammering, eyes dark with need and recognition. The kiss had broken something: walls, hesitation, the careful rhythm of restraint, but in the ruins, a deliberate intimacy had formed. A promise unspoken: we are no longer holding back. Not tonight. Not anymore. Lucia's lips curved faintly, breath mingling with Tori's, teasing, daring. Tori's pulse raced, body trembling with the realization that this collision, was exactly what she had wanted, without ever admitting it to herself. And in that charged, dangerous, exquisite space, they finally existed in the same rhythm, the same fire, the same undeniable gravity. Chapter 36. I Am Yours. The kiss reignited the moment it broke, harder, fiercer, hungrier than before. Lips, teeth, tongues, and breaths collided in a frenzy of suppressed longing. Every inch of space between them vanished as Tori's hands found Lucia's waist, sliding up, gripping, pulling her impossibly close. Lucia responded in kind, every finger, every brush of skin, mapping Tori's body with a precision born of patient observation, of months of craving what she could not yet name. Desire hummed between them, thick, electric, consuming, and there was no room for hesitation, no space for restraint. Tori's eyes darkened, teeth grazing the shell of Lucia's ear as she whispered against her skin, urgent, raw, here, now. And without another word, she steered them toward her private office, every step taut with anticipation, breath ragged, pulses racing like twin storms. The office door clicked closed behind them. The dim light cast shadows across the polished surfaces, but there was no thought of decor, no thought of control, only the pull of each other, the need to devour the months of waiting in flesh and heat. They fell onto the couch as one, collapsing in an exquisite chaos of limbs and lips. Hands roamed freely now over shoulders, down backs, across sides, pulling clothes, brushing skin, fingers tangling in hair, teeth grazing skin, hearts hammering with the sheer intensity of connection. Every gasp, every moan, every subtle arch of the body spoke of desire years in the making, the hunger of restraint exploding into a fire neither could control. Tori's precise, measured movements from the kitchen were gone, replaced by urgent, deliberate claims. Lucia matched her, patient in approach but untamed in passion, tracing every curve, memorizing every inch, pushing them both closer to the edge of delirium. Skin met skin. Heat wrapped around them like a storm. Clothes became obstacles, discarded with fervent, urgent precision, each removal a punctuation to months of anticipation, each touch a declaration of claim, of surrender, of reckless, desperate need. Their bodies moved together, rhythmless yet perfectly in sync, each kiss, each touch, each gasp a conversation more intimate than words could ever convey. They were fire and shadow, storm and calm, dangerous, electric, and utterly entwined. And through it all, the slow burn of their long patience made every brush of skin, every curve pressed against another, taste sweeter, feel sharper, burn hotter. They were no longer just Tori and Lucia. They were the culmination of months of anticipation, restraint, and slow, deliberate seduction finally set free. Chapter 37. Unguarded Connection. They moved together like fire and storm, a perfect, desperate rhythm, each thrust, each brush of skin, each gasp bringing them closer to the edge. Tori, usually in control of everything, every kitchen, every dish, every motion, was no longer herself. Her back arched, fingers clutching at Lucia's arms, teeth grazing skin, every nerve on fire. Lucia guided her, gentle yet insistent, patient and commanding all at once. She knew the precise pressure, the perfect angle, the rhythm that would shatter restraint completely. Tori's breath hitched, chest heaving, trembling against the delicious force of need that had been building for months. And then, together, it exploded. A shuddering, quaking, impossibly intense release that left them gasping, every muscle fired and exhausted, hearts hammering, pulses tangled. Tori cried out softly into Lucia's neck, hands clutching, lips pressing, letting the fire ripple through her in waves. Lucia held her through it, guiding her down, steadying her, letting the tremors roll out slowly, intentionally, savoring the aftershock as they melted into each other. They fell back onto the couch, limbs tangled, bodies slick with sweat, pressing together in the warm, electric haze of ecstasy. Tori's cheek rested against Lucia's collarbone, her fingers traced lazy, trembling patterns across bare skin. Lucia's hands tangled in her hair, occasionally grazing across Tori's back or arm, grounding them both in the aftermath of passion. Their breathing mingled, slow now, heavy and ragged, a shared rhythm that spoke of trust, surrender, and the intimacy of raw, unguarded connection. Neither spoke. There were no words necessary. The air around them was thick with their shared release, their bodies still trembling from it, pulses still synced. Every brush of skin, every shift of a hand, every small sigh was a conversation more intimate than anything they had said in months. And there, limbs intertwined, slick with sweat, hearts still hammering, they simply existed in the same space, breathing the same air, tasting the aftertaste of each other's fire, knowing that every wall they had built had fallen in the most exquisite, consuming way possible. Chapter 38. You're Mine. They lay intertwined on the couch, limbs tangled, bodies still slick with the aftermath of their shared storm. Every inhale, every exhale, was slow, deliberate, lingering in the heat, the sweat, the pulse of each other. The world outside the restaurant ceased to exist. Only this, only them remained. Lucia tilted her head, letting her lips brush against Tori's temple, the warmth of her breath teasing her ear. Her voice was soft, breathless, but laced with mischief and surrender. "You ruined me for every woman," she whispered, a slow smile tugging at the corner of her lips, fingers tracing idle patterns along Tori's shoulder. Tori's lips curved, dark and possessive, her fingers tightening just slightly in Lucia's hair, thumb brushing the nape of her neck. Her voice was low, husky, and threaded with ownership and desire that hadn't faded with the climax. "There will never be another woman touching what's mine," she murmured, pressing her forehead against Lucia's, letting the heat of their skin, the lingering pulse of their connection, speak louder than any declaration could. Lucia's laugh was soft, breathless, full of the thrill of surrender and amusement at the dangerous claim. She leaned in closer, resting her cheek against Tori's chest, listening to the storm of her heartbeat beneath her ear. Tori's hand drifted down, brushing over the small of Lucia's back, fingers curling just enough to anchor her there. Every motion, every touch, was deliberate, claiming, soothing, and savoring the intimacy of two bodies still trembling, still alive in the aftermath of their fire. They whispered little things, soft acknowledgments, teasing words, murmured praises. There were no grand declarations, no rushed confessions. Just the lingering electricity of what had passed, the delicious knowledge of ownership and trust, and the quiet settling of two hearts still racing together. Lucia's fingers traced the curve of Tori's jaw, lingering on the hollow just beneath her ear, her voice soft again, teasing, but full of reverence. "I'm yours," she whispered. Tori's lips brushed hers, soft, deliberate, a silent promise woven into the touch, a reaffirmation of the storm they had shared and the calm they now existed in together. And in that quiet aftermath, they simply breathed together, skins slick with heat, hearts still hammering, limbs tangled, fully claimed and fully surrendered to each other, knowing that the slow burn had finally found its home. Chapter 39. Morning brings clarity. Sunlight filtered through the half-closed blinds, spilling in stripes across the bedroom floor. The world outside stirred, but inside, time had slowed to the rhythm of two bodies still entangled. Tori stirred first, eyelids fluttering open to the warmth of skin pressed against hers, the scent of Lucia still clinging to her, the faint trace of perfume, the lingering heat of shared nights of fire and surrender. Her hand instinctively found Lucia's, fingers curling around, anchoring, unwilling to let go. Lucia murmured, a soft, sleepy sound, nuzzling closer, chest pressing to Tori's as if to physically remind her, "You are mine, and I am yours." Her lips brushed the shell of Tori's ear, teasing in that slow, deliberate way that had been months in the making. Neither spoke. Words were unnecessary. The possession, desire, and trust between them had been built over stolen glances, patient gestures, whispered provocations, and the long, deliberate arc of intimacy. Every touch, every breath, every heartbeat communicated what they had been too careful to say before. Tori shifted slightly, fingertips tracing lazy, featherlight paths along Lucia's back, memorizing the curves, the warmth, the soft tremor still lingering from the night before. She allowed herself to relax, letting the fortress slip just enough to enjoy the quiet surrender of having someone so deeply known and trusted pressed against her. Lucia responded by tightening her hold, her thumb brushing over the pulse at Tori's wrist, anchoring them together. Her eyes, half-lidded in post-climax haze and morning light, glimmered with mischief and the same deliberate hunger that had drawn them together in the first place. "Don't go," she whispered softly, not asking, not pleading, just stating a truth. Tori's lips curved against the top of her head, murmuring in kind, "Never. Not when you're mine." The words were soft, but deliberate. A promise, an acknowledgement, a claim. The room was warm, the air heavy with the memory of fire and sweat and intimacy, but also with the quiet contentment of two people finally finding the space to be themselves together. They moved in tandem without thinking, fingers brushing, bodies pressing, hearts sinking, a dance of ownership, desire, and trust that had been cultivated over months of slow, deliberate patience. Tori shifted again, allowing herself a small, calculated risk. She pressed her lips briefly to the curve of Lucia's shoulder, tasting, claiming, confirming. Lucia shivered, sighing into her neck, and leaned further into the contact, letting her body speak what her voice never could. In that morning light, wrapped in sheets and heat, they existed as one, bodies tangled, hearts pounding in tandem, hands and lips and breaths still exploring the language they had spent months building. There was no rush. There was no need. Just the exquisite, intoxicating knowledge that this closeness, this trust, this desire, was theirs and theirs alone. And Tori realized with a slow, delicious certainty that she never wanted to let go. Not tonight. Not ever. Chapter 40. Reality Awaits. The sunlight spilled softly across the room, warm and forgiving, painting stripes across their bodies tangled in the sheets. Every breath between them was measured, deliberate, yet heavy with the afterglow of the night's storm. Tori's fingers traced the curve of Lucia's shoulder, letting the pad of her thumb follow the line of her collarbone, memorizing the gentle rise and fall of muscle, the warmth of skin still flushed from their earlier fire. Lucia responded with a soft sigh, pressing closer, lips brushing the shell of Tori's neck in a slow, teasing claim. Their hands met, intertwined, exploring the familiar terrain of each other's bodies, not with urgency, but with careful, reverent attention, like charting a map they had spent months learning. Every touch, every brush of fingertips, spoke of curiosity, admiration, and the deep hunger of two people finally allowed to exist fully within each other's space. Lucia traced the line of Tori's jaw, eyes half-lidded, letting her fingers linger in her hair, across the slope of her shoulders, along the small dip at her back. Tori responded in kind, hands gliding over the curve of Lucia's hip, down the gentle slope of her side, memorizing the soft weight of her form, the delicate tension in each muscle. Every caress was a conversation, slow and deliberate, communicating trust and longing without a single word. Soft gasps and murmurs punctuated the rhythm, not of need, but of pleasure and presence, in touch, in the slow revelation of each other's body and mind. Every brush of skin, every lingering fingertip, every nuzzle was a reaffirmation. You are mine, and I am yours, fully, finally. They shifted together with care, mapping each other's responses, discovering tiny shivers, faint tremors, and delicate reactions. Each micro-movement was both giving and claiming, a balance of tenderness and desire that bound them together more tightly than any words ever could. Tori's lips found the small of Lucia's shoulder, soft and lingering, tasting the heat of skin, savoring it as if committing it to memory. Lucia's hand slid along Tori's spine, fingers brushing over every line, every curve, absorbing the warmth, the tremor, the pulse of her heartbeat. Time seemed to stretch and fold in on itself as they continued their slow exploration, a morning-after ritual that solidified months of anticipation, restraint, and mutual discovery into a shared, sacred space of intimacy and trust. Every touch, every sigh, every whispered murmur reinforced that this was more than desire. It was need, claim, and the promise of everything yet to come. And when they finally paused, bodies still intertwined, breaths mingling, hearts still racing, the quiet certainty lingered. They had discovered each other fully, with patience, tenderness, and the fire that would never fade. Chapter 41. Slow Morning. Lucia had just stretched, the morning sunlight gilding her skin, brushing over her hair like liquid gold. She was radiant, untamed, yet there was a deliberate patience in her movements, a careful control born from years of power and reputation. A Mafia queen in every sense, used to command, to having people bend to her will. And then Tori moved. A hand slid over Lucia's wrist as she leaned forward, eyes dark, commanding, yet tethered with tenderness. The touch was enough to pause her, to halt the poised, calculated queen mid-stretch. Tori's other hand pressed lightly into the curve of her hip, shifting her just enough to settle against her chest. "Not so fast," Tori murmured, her voice low, deliberate, threading through the quiet room. Lucia's eyes widened, a flash of surprise, a quick smirk tugging at her lips. She had expected resistance, but the recluse chef wasn't just resisting, she was claiming. Hands tangled, lips brushing in fleeting, deliberate kisses that were both punishment and reward. Tori pressed, slowly, letting the weight of her body, the deliberate placement of her hands, pin Lucia to the couch without cruelty, just a controlled, possessive insistence that left the queen hovering on the edge of surrender. Every inch of the motion spoke. "I own this moment. I own you." Lucia's laugh was low, husky, teasing, filled with the thrill of a predator discovering her match. She shifted, tried to reclaim space, to pull the advantage, but Tori mirrored every motion, subtle micro-adjustments of body and gaze, anticipating and countering with a precision born of patience and observation. Hands roamed, eyes locked. The tension wasn't just physical, it was cerebral, sensual, a slow dialogue of power, trust, and want. A touch to the jaw, a nudge of the shoulder, a deliberate pause at the curve of the back. Every micro-gesture was both a challenge and a surrender. Lucia's breath hitched, not in defeat but in delight. Here, in the quiet of morning, in the tangled sheets, the queen was learning the delicious patience of being pinned, of letting someone claim her for a moment, and Tori reveled in the controlled dominance she could wield without ever overstepping, without ever breaking the trust they had built. The room vibrated with quiet tension, the subtle, erotic game of predator and recluse, dominance and submission, power and surrender, all layered in tenderness, trust, and the lingering heat of desire. Lucia's lips found Tori's again, softer this time, but no less deliberate. A whispered, breathless, "You're dangerous," met a dark chuckle from Tori, who shifted just enough to tighten her claim, the couch now a stage for the intimate duel of control and surrender they both craved. Chapter 42. Suitable Location. The quiet of the private office pressed around them, punctuated only by ragged breaths and the faint hum of the city waking beyond the blinds. Tori's eyes flicked toward the door, toward the faint light creeping beneath the crack. Staff would soon begin the morning ritual, the kitchen awakening, the restaurant alive again. A sharp thrill ran through them both. The thought of being discovered, of the world intruding on their perfectly private chaos, made their hearts race anew. Tori pressed a last lingering kiss to the curve of Lucia's neck, teeth grazing softly, just enough to elicit a shiver, claiming what she could before the world returned. Reluctantly, Tori disentangled herself, brushing against Lucia, hands lingering on the small of her back as they began the slow, deliberate ritual of dressing. Every button, every pull of fabric, every adjustment of hair was an excuse to steal a kiss, a whisper, a lingering touch. Lucia's hands traced Tori's arms, down her spine, fingers catching in the soft hair at the nape of her neck, letting her lips linger at the corner of Tori's mouth as if to say, "This isn't over." Tori responded in kind, pressing her forehead against Lucia's, murmuring low and dark, "Tonight, we continue. Somewhere more suitable." A spark of mischief glimmered in Lucia's eyes, the slow curve of her lips teasing, "Your apartment, or mine?" Her fingers brushed Tori's cheek in a fleeting, intimate gesture, leaving just enough heat behind to make Tori pause mid-button. Tori's lips curled into a dark, calculated smile, thumb tracing the line of Lucia's jaw. Either, "We'll see who gives in first." The tension of almost being discovered, of stolen moments, only amplified the thrill, desire, and intimacy between them. Each movement, each glance, each stolen kiss reinforced the bond, the ownership, the slow, deliberate build of their connection. Finally, dressed, but still skin-brushed skin in their secret intimacy, they lingered. Fingers intertwined, breaths mingling, eyes locked. A silent, mutual promise hovered in the air. Tonight, their slow burn would continue, and the world would wait outside the door. Chapter 43. Bubbles and Desire. Tori arrived at Lucia's residence, the evening air thick with the scent of distant rain and city streets. The note had been brief, delivered by a quiet driver. "I want you tonight. Come alone." Her heartbeat had quickened on the ride, but nothing could have prepared her for the sight that greeted her. The door opened before she could knock. Lucia stood there, commanding, radiant, every inch deliberate in her presentation, but her eyes softened when they met Tori's. A slow smile curved her lips, teasing, knowing. "Welcome," she said, voice low and velvety, heavy with anticipation and promise. Tori stepped inside, the faint sound of running water drawing her gaze toward the bathroom. There it was, a bath, steaming, warm water rippling gently under floating bubble foam and scattered rose petals, the soft glow of candles flickering across the room. The scent of jasmine and rose filled the air, intoxicating, daring. Lucia moved ahead, hands brushing lightly against Tori's arms as she guided her closer, not rushing, but letting the anticipation stretch, coil, and thrum between them. Every step was a conversation, every glance a tease. "I thought we could start here," Lucia whispered, letting her fingers trace the line of Tori's collarbone, brushing the warmth of skin over fabric. "And see where the night takes us." Tori's breath hitched, pulse racing. Her eyes scanned the scene, the bath, the petals, the deliberate, intimate preparation of a space meant for surrender and trust, and she realized the full weight of what this was: Lucia Romano, in control, yet giving herself fully. Creating a world for just the two of them. Tori's hands found Lucia's hips, fingers digging in just enough to anchor, to claim. She stepped closer, the heat between them growing, pulses sinking, breaths mingling. No words were needed. The rose petals, the bubbles, the warmth of water and candlelight all sang of seduction, trust, and patience rewarded. Lucia's lips brushed Tori's ear, teeth grazing softly, sending a shiver down her spine. "Come," she whispered, guiding Tori closer to the bath. Every gesture was careful, intimate, charged, showing Tori the slow mastery of touch, anticipation, and ownership that had been months in the making. Tori's fingers trembled slightly as she shed the last of her clothing, eyes never leaving Lucia's, reading her every movement, every breath, every micro-expression. They entered the bath together, water rippling around them, petals floating between their bodies like confetti of desire and surrender. And in that warm, scented water, every touch, every gaze, every shared breath solidified the trust, desire, and ownership that had grown between them. Months of patience, teasing, stolen glances, subtle dominance, and surrender all converged in a slow, deliberate intimacy that was at once luxurious, erotic, and sacred. Chapter 44. Complete Surrender. The warm water lapped gently around them, carrying the scent of rose and jasmine as petals floated between their bodies like whispers of seduction. Tori sank slowly, letting the heat of the bath envelope her, but it was the weight of Lucia's hand on her back, the deliberate press of her palm between shoulder blades, that drew the first shiver. Lucia's fingers traced the curve of Tori's spine, lingering along the small of her back, pausing at the swell of her hips. Every touch was measured, patient, intimate, teaching Tori how to let go, how to surrender to sensation without losing herself entirely. Tori tilted her head, lips brushing along Lucia's shoulder as she leaned closer, tracing the delicate line of her jaw with the feather-light touch of her fingers. The heat of the water, the scent of flowers, and the closeness of their bodies made every micro-gesture electric. Lucia responded in kind, hands mapping Tori's body with reverent curiosity, fingertips exploring the planes of her arms, the dip beneath her collarbone, the curve of her thighs just beneath the water's surface. Every exploration was both claiming and cherishing, a slow dialogue of touch that needed no words. Their lips met in soft, teasing kisses at first, lips brushing, teeth grazing lightly, and then lingering, tasting, learning, remembering. The water swirled around them, petals floating like delicate sparks, as they discovered and rediscovered each other, not in urgency, but in patient, deliberate intimacy. Tori's hands traced the swell of Lucia's hips, tilting her slightly closer, and Lucia leaned into it, breath hitching, murmuring against her neck. Her voice was soft, heavy with need, but restrained. "I've wanted this, every moment." Tori pressed her forehead to Lucia's, letting the warmth of skin against skin speak where words could not. Her lips brushed along the curve of Lucia's collarbone, then over the swell of her shoulder, Every kiss a promise, a claim, a confession in touch. They explored each other's forms like maps, fingers tracing curves, palms memorizing the subtle tremors and shivers, lips brushing where the skin was most sensitive. The bath became a sanctuary of slow-burning desire, every gesture cultivating the intimacy and trust that had been months in the making. Lucia's hands cupped Tori's face, thumbs brushing along the jaw, eyes locked on hers, daring her to surrender fully. Tori responded with a soft sigh, pressing herself closer, letting the weight of desire and longing flow between them, learning how to be held and how to hold in return. And in that water, surrounded by petals and flickering candlelight, time ceased to exist. Each touch, each sigh, each whispered breath reinforced the bond, the hunger, and the patience. The slow burn had become a fire they both could fully inhabit, in trust, in surrender, and in shared possession. Chapter 45, I Am Home. Lucia guided Tori out of the bath, droplets clinging to skin like dew, hands lingering just long enough to tease, to claim, to draw shivers with the weight of presence. Towel in hand, Tori wrapped herself slowly, but not without stolen kisses, soft, deliberate, teasing at lips, jaw, neck. The bedroom was dimly lit, shadows playing along the walls, the faint scent of rose petals lingering in the air. Every step they took together was measured, deliberate, a dance of patience and desire. Tori's fingers brushed along the curve of Lucia's back as they moved, tracing the outline of her spine, memorizing the small of her waist, the swell of her hips, every subtle detail that had haunted her thoughts for months. Lucia leaned into each touch, guiding Tori to the center of the bed, pressing her palm against Tori's chest, letting her feel the pulse of her own heartbeat. Slow, she whispered, not a command, but a promise, a shared rhythm they had both learned in the months of teasing, studying, and building restraint. Tori sank down beside her, hands exploring with deliberate care, fingers mapping the planes of her body again, revisiting the tremors, the shivers, the delicate responses that spoke of desire, trust, and surrender. Every movement was mutual, a slow push and pull, a subtle dialogue of dominance and surrender woven into tenderness and longing. Lucia responded with soft gasps and whispered encouragements, letting Tori's touch guide her, surrendering in the slowest, most deliberate way, no urgency, no recklessness, just shared, intimate discovery. Lips brushed necks, shoulders, collarbones, tracing the lines of skin that had become sacred maps for both of them. Tori's lips found hers, first gentle, testing, then more insistent, tasting and claiming in equal measure. Every kiss was a continuation of what had started months ago in stolen glances, careful gestures, and subtle acknowledgments of ownership and desire. Their bodies moved together with slow, deliberate intimacy, hands brushing, lingering, exploring, memorizing each curve, each shiver, each breath. The tension, need, and desire they had nurtured over months manifested in every microtouch, every whispered word, every slow drag of lips along skin. Lucia's fingers threaded through Tori's hair, tugging lightly, pulling her closer, encouraging a surrender that was patiently given, not demanded. Tori responded in kind, holding her, pressing close, letting the heat of their bodies, the shared rhythm of their breaths, and the slow burn of months-long longing solidify into this quiet, intimate fire. And there, in the dimly lit bedroom, time ceased to exist. Just skin, warmth, breath, whispered words, gentle touches, and the mutual claim and surrender of two souls who had waited, teased, and finally found the courage to fully inhabit each other's world. Tori's hands slid along the curve of Lucia's waist, pressing her gently against her, letting the warmth of their bodies fuse. Her lips hovered over Lucia's, just brushing, teasing, tasting the quiet acceptance in her breath before daring to deepen the kiss. Lucia's hands traced Tori's jaw, then down the slope of her shoulders, fingers lingering, teasing, claiming. She leaned closer, whispering against Tori's lips, "I want you. Fully, not just pieces." The words were low, deliberate, heavy with intent, and yet soft enough not to shatter the fragile control Tori still held. Tori's pulse thundered, a slow tremor of excitement and desire, and she responded with a subtle shift, pressing her chest to Lucia's, demonstrating possession without rushing, dominance without fear, letting every microtouch speak louder than any words could. Her fingers threaded through the soft waves of Lucia's hair, tugging lightly, encouraging yet still patient. Lucia's eyes glimmered, the faintest smirk tugging at her lips. She pushed just enough against Tori's grip to test the boundaries, to tease the recluse chef into acknowledging the fire she couldn't contain. Every glance, every brush of skin, every whispered breath was deliberate, a slow dance of challenge and surrender, dominance and patience. Tori's lips found the curve of Lucia's neck, kissing and nipping, letting the heat of desire bloom without overwhelming them. Her hands roamed with precision, mapping, memorizing, claiming the terrain of Lucia's body in a silent dialogue of intent and need. Lucia responded by leaning into every touch, pressing closer, letting her breath hitch, letting her fingers linger on Tori's shoulders, her back, her chest. She allowed herself small, deliberate vulnerabilities, a quiver of sighs, a shiver at a well-placed touch, without ever letting go of her inner control. Their whispers tangled with gasps, words flowing like threads in a slow weave. "You're mine," Tori murmured, voice low, deliberate. Lucia's reply was softer, teasing, yet intentional, "And I am yours." They pressed closer, exploring and discovering, teasing, surrendering. Each kiss, each micro-movement of fingers along skin, each brush of lips across collarbones strengthened the intimate claim they had cultivated over months, building a tension that was both erotic and tender, possessive yet nurturing. Lucia shifted slightly, letting her lips brush against Tori's ear, whispering, "I could make you beg, and I'd wait for every second of it." Tori shivered, chest pressed to hers, heart hammering, knowing that this was the culmination of their slow dance of patience, desire, and subtle dominance. And in that dimly lit bedroom, wrapped in heat, scent, and whispered promises, they existed entirely for each other, a rhythm of push and pull, challenge and surrender, dominance and trust, all woven into the sacred tapestry of intimacy that had taken months to cultivate. Chapter 46. Take Me. The candlelight flickered across the room, painting shadows on the walls as Tori pressed herself closer to Lucia, their bodies already humming with heat, with anticipation that had been simmering for months. Every breath was heavy, every heartbeat a drum that synchronized between them. Lucia's fingers traced the line of Tori's jaw, down her neck, brushing shoulders, teasing along the slopes of her body. Tori's lips found her in return, slow, deliberate, claiming yet gentle, tasting the warmth of her skin, memorizing every curve. Lucia's hands roamed over Tori's back, down to her waist, exploring with patience and intentional need, teasing micro-surrenders from the recluse chef who had never let anyone in so fully. And now, in the privacy of the bedroom, Tori responded with the same deliberate care, every touch a dialogue, every shiver a confession. Tori leaned in, whispering low against her ear, "You're mine tonight." Not possessive in cruelty, but in claim, trust, and the slow unraveling of every wall she had built. Lucia's breath hitched, pressing closer, letting her lips brush along the curve of Tori's neck, murmuring back, "And I am yours." Her fingers slid into Tori's hair, tugging lightly, testing and coaxing, her body arching in subtle surrender, while still holding her inner control. The tension broke with a whisper of motion, bodies shifting, hips pressing, hands mapping skin like a sacred ritual. Every kiss, every gentle nibble, Every teasing brush of fingers across heated skin built layers of fire and trust, a slow crescendo rather than a rush, a communion of desire that had been months in the making. Lucia let herself fall into the warmth of Tori's embrace, sighing against her shoulder, letting the vulnerability and longing show in every tremble, every shiver. Tori's hands moved in response, tracing curves, memorizing, claiming, but always with tenderness, letting their slow-burn patience dictate the rhythm. Whispers and murmurs tangled with gasps. "I've waited for this," Tori breathed, voice low, reverent. "And I'll wait for every inch," Lucia replied, a soft, teasing promise, lips brushing over Tori's jaw. The slow rhythm of intimacy grew bolder, fingers and lips exploring, tracing, mapping, claiming, but never in haste. Every shared sigh, every shiver, every whispered word solidified the trust and ownership they had built, turning desire into a sacred, shared ritual of surrender and connection. Bodies intertwined, breaths mingling, hearts racing and slowing in tandem, they discovered each other fully, not just flesh, but the weight of months of longing, patience, and mutual claiming, until even the slow burn felt like an inferno contained within the tender space of their embrace. Finally, they lay together, slick with warmth and sweat, limbs tangled, foreheads pressed, breathing the same air. Eyes met, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. They had crossed the threshold of patience, teasing, and restraint into something deeper: ownership, trust, and unspoken promises. Chapter 47. The morning after. The city outside never paused, but inside the walls they shared, time moved to their rhythm. Tori and Lucia had crossed thresholds months in the making, their slow burn becoming a lived, pulsing reality, a world where stolen glances and teasing touches were no longer fleeting. They were everyday promises of ownership, desire, and care. Their mornings began tangled in sheets, limbs entwined, bodies still slick with heat from nights that never truly ended. Tori's hand always found Lucia's first, fingers curling possessively around hers. Lucia's lips always sought Tori's shoulder, neck, collarbone, in deliberate, knowing kisses that reminded the recluse chef just how claimed she was. Meals became intimate affairs, not just of taste, but of touch and subtle dominance, the delicate push and pull of who would guide, who would surrender. Every shared glance across a table, every brush of skin beneath the fabric of clothing, reinforced the bond that had started in patient observation and gentle defiance. Even in the quiet moments, the bath, the morning coffee, the stolen kiss in a crowded hallway, they moved together with intent and reverence, aware of the power they held over one another and savoring it fully. Desire no longer needed to be earned in stealth. It was freely claimed, exchanged, celebrated. Yet, the slow burn never left. It had transformed into a steady, relentless fire, the kind that whispered in the curve of a shoulder, the twitch of a smile, the brush of fingers over a sensitive spot. Tori still anticipated Lucia's moves, small micro-adjustments instinctively guiding her. Lucia still teased, still challenged, but now with the confidence of someone who knew her place and the joy of owning it fully. And in the quiet, private corners of their life, they reveled in mutual possession, not as confinement, but as liberation. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered word reinforced, "You are mine, and I am yours, and we have earned this intimacy through patience, desire, and trust." They had surrendered, not in haste, not in recklessness, but with full awareness, full intention, and full hearts. The life they shared was slow, deliberate, sensual, and wholly theirs, a rhythm of passion, teasing dominance, tenderness, and desire that would never fade. Tori, once a fortress, now allowed walls to crumble in the right places. Lucia, once the patient observer, now claimed space with deliberate elegance. And together, they existed in a world where passion met ownership, desire met trust, and every moment was theirs to savor. Epilogue: a new life. Morning coffee. The sunlight spills across the kitchen, warm and golden. Tori moves silently, preparing her espresso with the precision of a maestro, but every so often her hand brushes against Lucia's on the counter, on her waist, trailing teasingly as if testing the waters. Lucia leans casually against the counter, eyes glinting with mischief. You make coffee like you run your kitchen, ruthlessly precise. Tori smirks, letting her fingers linger on the curve of Lucia's hip. And you like to watch, don't you? Lucia's laugh is low, playful, and she leans in, pressing a soft kiss to the side of Tori's neck, just enough to draw a shiver. Every day, even in mundane routines, their touch carries ownership, playfulness, and desire. Kitchen tease. Tori is plating dishes for a private dinner, each movement controlled and deliberate. Lucia leans against the doorway, arms crossed, watching. You always do that, she murmurs, nodding toward the way Tori arranges a drizzle of sauce with precise micro-adjustments. Tori doesn't glance up, just slides a finger across the edge of the plate where a streak of sauce was slightly off. And you always wait too long to taste. Lucia smirks, stepping forward, letting her hand lightly brush Tori's arm. I like waiting. Anticipation makes the first taste unforgettable. The game of dominance and surrender continues even here, playful, teasing, yet intimate. Evening in the study. Candles flicker across the study, soft music drifting from a record player. Tori is seated, reviewing a new menu, pensively adjusting notes. Lucia steps in, silently, letting her fingers curl around Tori's shoulders from behind, resting her chin lightly on Tori's head. You work too hard. Tori leans back, letting herself melt into the touch, a soft exhale escaping her lips. And you encourage me to slow down. Lucia kisses the crown of her head, whispering, I like claiming you in the quiet moments. The quiet assertion of possession and mutual surrender deepens here, soft, tender, and erotic in its subtlety. Bedside ritual. Night falls, and Tori lies in bed reading. Lucia slips in, tracing the line of Tori's jaw with her fingertips, letting them linger along the curve of her neck and shoulder. Tori's book lowers slowly as she tilts her head into the touch. Every night, she murmurs. Lucia presses her lips briefly to Tori's shoulder. Every night, she replies, letting her body curl against Tori's, the heat, intimacy, and subtle dominance of their relationship perfectly expressed without words. Shared bath. A weekend indulgence. Warm water, rose petals, candlelight. No rush, no need, just skin against skin, lips brushing, fingers tracing curves, sighs and murmurs echoing off the tiles. Lucia's hand presses to Tori's chest, letting her fingers dance across her collarbone. You're mine, she whispers. Tori's lips find hers in return, slow and deliberate. And I am yours. Even in repetition, the slow burn remains, now fully solidified and lived in a rhythm of trust, desire, and intimacy. They became more. Their trust in each other was stronger, and it showed in their life. Vineyard retreat. Lucia had arranged a weekend escape to a private vineyard in Tuscany. The air was rich with grapes, the warmth of the sun mingling with the heat between them. Tori moved among the barrels, tasting the new vintages with her usual meticulousness, but she felt Lucia's gaze tracing her every move. Each glance, each touch, a hand on her elbow, a brush along the small of her back, was deliberate, teasing, claiming. As the sun dipped behind rolling hills, they sat on a worn wooden bench, a bottle of wine between them. Lucia poured slowly, letting Tori's hand hover over hers before guiding it to the glass. Patience is key, she murmured, voice low, teasing, yet full of intent. When Tori finally sipped, Lucia leaned close, brushing her lips to Tori's ear, and sometimes, patience is delicious torture. Tori shivered, the heat of wine and proximity blending with the thrill of being observed, claimed, and desired. Private Chef's Challenge. Lucia organized an intimate evening at Maison Lumiere, just them, the kitchen, and a challenge. Tori would create a tasting menu without knowing the ingredients, guided only by subtle gestures and whispered clues from Lucia. Every ingredient brought was a test, every dish a silent dialogue. Lucia's eyes flicked toward Tori's hands, watching the way she moved, anticipating her choices. Tori, usually untouchable in the kitchen, found herself responding instinctively to Lucia's subtle cues, the unspoken language they had nurtured over months. By the last course, both were laughing, breathless, the playful competition having turned into a sensual game of ownership and teasing, their hands brushing, lips meeting over a stolen bite, lingering touches beneath the tablecloth. Rainy night balcony. A sudden storm trapped them on the balcony of Lucia's penthouse. The rain hammered the glass, the city lights reflecting like 1,000 sparks. Lucia pulled Tori close, letting the sound of rain, the warmth of their bodies, and the charge of public-private thrill become a playground for intimacy. Fingers traced along wet skin exposed at the neckline, lips brushing over damp hair, each movement slow, deliberate, teasing and owning. Tori's hands cupped Lucia's face, guiding her closer while letting her own chest press flush against her. "Even out here, you're mine," she whispered. Lucia's lips curved in response, "And I have always been yours." Moonlit garden dinner. Lucia arranged a private dinner under an Italian olive grove, candles flickering, the scent of herbs in the warm night air. The table was set with care, a feast designed to indulge all senses. Tori, usually in full command of every detail, found herself relaxing into the evening, letting Lucia orchestrate, responding to gentle touches, soft gazes, and whispered instructions. Halfway through the meal, Lucia leaned forward, fingers brushing Tori's, sending a shiver down her spine, a silent question in her touch. Tori's gaze met hers, slow, deliberate, and in that glance, ownership, desire, and trust intertwined without a word spoken. Special Occasion 5. Hidden Bath Escape. Lucia filled a private spa in a historic villa with warm water, rose petals, and candles. They slipped in together, letting the water, scent, and warmth create a cocoon where nothing existed except each other. Hands explored slowly, lips brushing across shoulders, collars, and jawlines, teasing, claiming, tasting. Every sigh, shiver, and whispered word reinforced the ownership and surrender they had cultivated over months, making even a bath a moment of erotic ceremony. A year later. Spring morning. Sunlight filters through sheer curtains. Tori makes espresso with surgical precision, Lucia leaning over her shoulder, brushing lips along her neck. Fingers curl around each other's hands as they steal morning kisses. Outside, cherry blossoms sway in the breeze, a quiet ritual of tenderness and claiming. Later the afternoon they escaped to the vineyard. Lucia and Tori wander among rows of ripening grapes, tasting wines, teasing each other over small indulgences. Tori adjusts a wine glass. Lucia's fingers hover over her hand, brushing it with deliberate slowness. They laugh. They steal glances, dominance, and surrender mingling effortlessly. That evening a storm traps them on a balcony in the city. Clothes damp, hair wet, skin close. Every touch is a tease, every whisper deliberate. The thrill of exposure sharpens desire, a reminder that even outside the bedroom, their slow-burn intimacy governs the space. Autumn afternoon brought private kitchen challenges. Lucia surprises Tori in Maison Lumiere's private kitchen. Tori cooks while Lucia offers subtle clues, testing her intuition and patience. Fingers brush as sauces are drizzled. A stolen taste leads to a soft, lingering kiss. Laughter, teasing, and ownership fill the air. Candlelit garden dinners were memorable. Under an olive grove, candles flicker, the scent of herbs mixing with warm wine. They feed each other bites, fingers grazing arms and hands, eyes locking in silent understanding. Ownership is gentle but firm. Desire is slow, deliberate, and mutual. Winter crept in and snowed them in. Outside, snow piles high. Inside, Tori and Lucia wrap in blankets on the couch, sipping hot chocolate. Fingers intertwine, hair brushes across cheeks, and lips meet in soft, lazy kisses. Even domesticity is laced with intimacy, teasing, and the quiet thrill of knowing they belong fully to each other. Their bathroom became a private spa. A private bath with rose petals and warm water. Candles reflect off the walls, steam curling around their bodies. Every touch, every glance, every slow kiss is a reaffirmation of their ownership, desire, and trust. And soon it was New Year's Eve, private celebration. Fireworks explode outside. They toast champagne, laughter bubbling into soft kisses. Tori guides Lucia to the dance floor of their penthouse, moving slowly, deliberately, pressing close. Ownership, patience, and passion, all fully realized in the rhythm of their bodies and hearts. The year ends in a quiet embrace, Tori and Lucia wrapped in blankets, lips pressed, hands tracing familiar curves. Every micro-touch, every whispered word, every shared laugh a testament to months of slow-burn patience, teasing, and trust now solidified in unshakable love. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe and like this video and follow me for more stories. You are always welcome here, and leave me a comment or a thumbs up, just letting me know if you like the story and would like more, or is there perhaps an idea that you would like to share or let me write for you.